Hi everyone and welcome to Creative Cakes by Sharon. Since doing my Monster High skull cake, I've had lots of requests from you guys to make another Monster High themed cake. So today I'm going to show you how to make Draculaura. So I'm using a few templates today to create her, and you can get copies of these in the description box below the video, so just click on the link. I've got a 10 by 10 inch square cake and I've got two layers. I've got a long fondant roller and my small fondant roller. I've got a little bit of water and a paintbrush. I've got my pizza cutter, a sharp knife, my offset spatula and a little palette knife. I've got my X-Acto blade and I've got an edible marker. I've had lots of questions about these. These are food grade and edible, so they're fine to use on a cake. I've also got a Love Heart plunge cutter. I've got some chocolate ganache, which I'm going to use to fill and cover the cake. I've got some purple fondant, some white fondant, and a few shades of pink, as well as some black fondant and a little bit of pink shimmer dust. I've also got my board, which I've covered in pink fondant, so let's get started. So I've placed my templates now on the cake, and holding my knife vertical, I'm just going to cut around the edge of the templates. Make sure you keep your knife straight at all times so that you don't get any crooked edges, and once you've cut around the templates, just remove the excess cake. Now I want to create some definition in her hair, so I'm going to cut along the top of her fringe, or you might call them bangs, and then using my knife I'm just going to cut about 1 centimetre deep into the cake, and from the sides of the cake I'm just going to cut in toward that initial cut, and also with the ponytail I'm just going to cut that as well so that it's tapered. Now here I've got my chocolate ganache and you can see that it's really velvety and shiny and smooth, so I'm just going to dollop the chocolate ganache onto the centre of both cakes and create a nice layer of ganache for the filling. Once I've done this, I'm just going to pop the tops back on top of the cake and then cover them both with more chocolate ganache, making sure I seal all the edges and also getting into the groove in her hair. Once this is done, I'm going to pop them in the fridge for about 15 minutes to set. Once I remove the cakes from the fridge, they're set to the touch, and using some boiling water and my spatula, I'm going to smooth over the surface of the cakes to get a nice even finish. As you go, make sure you wipe off any excess water with your paper towel and continue until you've smoothed all the edges of the cake. Now the base of the cakes are ready for decorating, and to start with I'm just going to create some definition on the nose, the eyebrows and the ears. So I'm just going to take little bits of fondant and try and shape them using my template as a guide into the shape of those features. Once I'm happy with the nose and the eyebrow shapes and the ear that I've created, I'm going to put the template back onto the cake, and using the blunt end of my paintbrush I'm just going to score gently through the template so that I get a little bit of a marking on the cake, and then use that as a guide to position these pieces of fondant onto the cake. To create her face now, I've just separated the template from the hair and the face section. I'm just going to roll out my light pink fondant into about 2 to 3 mils thick. And using my template as a guide, I'm going to trim off the top edge so that I get a nice flat and straight edge. And around the bottom and sides of her face, I'm going to leave about 2 inches to cover the front and sides of the cake. Now I'm going to score a line at the top of the template so I know where to place my fondant, and gently roll it off my roller onto the cake. I'm going to smooth all of the edges of the fondant and going into the creases that we created with the ear and the eyebrows and the nose, to make sure that they're going to stand out. Once I've smoothed all the sides of my cake, I'm going to trim off all the excess fondant with the X-Acto blade. I'm going to work on this section of the hair now, so I've rolled out my black fondant, and using the template I'm just going to fold up this little section because I'm going to add that later, and with the X-Acto blade I'm just going to cut along the inside line of the template, and again leaving about 2 inches at the top to cover the back and front of the cake. Then I'm just going to drape it gently over the top of the cake and then smooth all of the edges of the fondant. Use your finger to get in the crease and then trim off all the excess. To create this back section of her hair that goes behind her ears, I've just taken some of my rolled black fondant and just cut around the template, which is the section that is around her ears, and simply position that on the cake behind her ear and smooth it down and cut off all the excess. I also did this for the other side of her hair, just using a rectangle and sticking it onto the side of her face. Before I start creating the eyes, you can see here I've cut the eye shapes out of the stencil, and I've got my stencil on top of the cake, and again with the back of my paintbrush I'm just scoring in some fairly faint lines into the fondant to act as a guide when we come to position the eyes on the cake. So here I've got the two little eye templates on some white fondant that I've rolled out fairly thin, and I'm just going to trace around those with my X-Acto blade, and then using a little bit of water and a paintbrush I'm just going to gently pick them up and adhere them to the cake. To do the coloured section of her eyes, it's a similar process by rolling out some of my light purple fondant, cutting my template down so that I'm just left with the purple sections. And once I've cut it out of the fondant, I'm just going to adhere that as well onto the cake. To make the pupils of the eyes, I'm just going to roll out two little balls of black fondant and press them down onto my template until I've got the correct size, and also stick them onto the centre of the eyes. Now to create the highlights and reflections in the eyes, I've just cut out two tiny little triangles and rolled two balls and positioned them on the cake. Moving on to the lips now, to create her top and bottom lip, I created a series of little balls which I then shaped using the template as a guide, and for the top lip I've positioned the two little balls as close together as possible, and then I've rolled out another very thin piece of pink fondant which I've then layered over the top of the two pieces which form the top lip so that I can create a skin-like appearance over both of those joins so that it looks like it's one lip. I've cut off the excess fondant on the sides, and then gently turning it upside down, I've just tucked the fondant in underneath. Once again, we can use the template and the back of the paintbrush to mark gently onto the fondant where we're going to position the lips and then adhere them to the cake. Using my love heart plunge cutter now, I'm just going to cut out a little love heart which I'm then going to put on the side of her cheek. To create the eyebrows, I've just rolled out some black fondant and cut the eyebrows out of the stencil, and once I've cut them out of the fondant I'm just going to place them on the top of the cake. Now for the eyelashes, I've cut them out of the stencil as well, and I've put them onto some black fondant that I've rolled out, and I'm going to do a basic shape right around the edge of the tips of the eyelash. Once I've done this, I'm then going to use my blade to cut into the fondant on an angle with each cut to create each individual eyelash. While doing this, I will be removing the fondant in between each eyelash because I want the eyelashes to all be separate from each other. Before positioning the eyelashes, I've created a little bit of a well with the back of my paintbrush around the top and bottom of the eye, and then put a little bit of water into that well, and then I've just gently picked up my eyelashes and tried to stand them in that little well. When you do this, it's important to remember to support the eyelashes at the back with your fingers and perhaps a paintbrush, and gently curl them forward to take shape. Repeat the process for the other eye, gently manoeuvring the eyelashes until you're happy with them. To create Draculaura's little fangs, I've just cut out two tiny little triangles and positioned them under her top lip. Now I'm going to use my little shimmer dust to add the eyeshadow to the cake. So with my fluffy brush and a little bit of the dust on the edge of the brush, I'm just going to gradually build up a nice pink shade of eyeshadow, just gently going behind the eyelashes up to the eyebrow. Now that I've finished all the features on her face, I can work on finishing off the hair. So I've got my template here, and where the pink stripes in her hair are, I'm just indenting the fondant along that line. And I'm going to create a little bit of a line all the way back to the top of her hair so that when I cut out my pink fondant, this is going to be my guide. So of course, before I can add the pink parts to the hair, I've got to cover the other section of cake for the little end of the ponytail or pigtail. So just with some black rolled fondant, I'm going to cover that, smooth it off and trim off all the excess. And I'm going to also indent some lines where the pink fondant's going to go, so it's all ready for the streaks in the hair. We're just going to quickly transfer both pieces of cake onto the cake board. Now we can work on the pink streaks in the hair, and I've cut out my template and I'm going to remove the black sections, and on a rolled piece of pink fondant I'm going to cut around the streaks of the template and adhere them to the cake with a little bit of water. Finally, using the edible marker, I've just added some details to her eyes, around her nose and in her ear. And I finished off the cake with a little safety pin earring for Draculaura and a few little bats flying around the board. So guys, if you enjoyed this tutorial, I'd love it if you could give it a like and share it with your friends. I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below, or find me on Facebook. Guys, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more creative cake tutorials. Thanks for watching and have a clawsome day.